welcome to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. And today we're talking with Alex Bromley of Verbal Judo. Alex, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here with you.
Now, we are really thrilled to have you. You sent me your bio, which is just an eye popper of a bio. You've got a huge amount of expertise, and I want to share that with our listeners before we get started. Alex Bromley is an 8-year law enforcement officer specializing in sex crimes, child abuse, and human trafficking. He partnered with the Verbal Judo Institute in 2018 and is now a national instructor. Alex has a master's degree in criminal justice and homeland security and a minor in psychology. He's trained hundreds of professionals in the handling of agitated, chaotic events and was invited to speak at the Crisis Intervention Team International Conference in Chicago, Illinois. He was awarded the Crisis Intervention Team of New Jersey Trainer of the Year Award and previously acted as the coordinator for his county's Crisis Intervention Team training. And he's here today to talk to us about how Verbal Judo can transform the way we communicate with our children to diffuse conflict and increase safety. That's an impressive list of qualifications. I'm really glad to have you aboard. The thing that really jumped out at me about it is what I respect and admire most about law enforcement officers isn't the kicking in the door and arresting the bad guys part of it that we see on TV, but the fact that you guys volunteer to see shit that would harrow the souls of an average mortal. And 8 years of that, I think, would turn a normal human being into Batman. But I mean, seriously, right? But you instead went and learned how to communicate more effectively with people. And that's what you're here to talk to about today. And that's, to me, very impressive and very inspiring. And it's why we wanted to chat with you guys. I like to really, when I go back and look at how I got into this and why I'm sitting here today, I think a huge aspect, you see all this stuff on TV and, you talk about the kicking in the doors and the shooting and chasing. And when you really break down, when you're in the field, when you're in law enforcement, you realize that is so far from the reality of what being a law enforcement officer is, especially today. You do all this training for exactly what you said, for the tactical side of being a law enforcement officer. But I would say 99% of what you're doing is communication. And unfortunately, you really, as you go through your law enforcement training, you realize you do not train in communication. You don't train in how to talk to someone, how to diffuse conflict. You train in so many things that are going to keep you safe. But if you can focus whatever you do, as a contact professional, anyone who has dealings with the public, if you can focus on ways to communicate effectively and diffuse conflict, you can avoid the danger that comes after communication is broken down in so many occasions. So I think that this is the basis, not just for law enforcement officers, but for anyone who's in contact with the public, is that communication aspect. And we don't train it. We just don't. So that's why I'm always happy to go and talk to people about that simple aspect of being a professional. And I think as parents, we need that as well, because that's one of the many places where we don't get training as parents either. The training we got is what we remember from our parents, and if we were lucky, that was a good model. If we were really lucky, that was a good model. If we were lucky, it was a good model for the 80s and 90s, but we've kind of learned better over the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's a whole different world today. I think that to be a parent today is, especially with the influence of technology and everything that's going on in the world, it's probably more challenging now than it ever has been. There's so many different ways and so many things that you have to be aware of, but just being able to communicate effectively with your child is the basis of it all. Is if you have a good relationship with your child and are able to communicate effectively without conflict, you're going to put yourself at such an advantage for their safety and for the well-being of your family dynamic. And I think, we can start there and build.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So let's talk a bit about what is Verbal Judo in a nutshell and how can parents apply its core concepts?
So when we talk about the history, you see the book behind you. Verbal Judo as a training institute was born out of the book that you see behind you. Dr. George Thompson wrote Verbal Judo in 1983. Doc Thompson was a really interesting guy. He took a variety of different disciplines that he was proficient in and kind of combined them all together to develop the world's first tactical communication system for, and when we talk about what tactical communication means and who we're communicating with, we're talking boardroom to bedroom. He created this class to be effective professionally as contact professionals, but also in your personal relationships as well. So what it actually means, judo, why it's a martial art, Ju means gentle, and do means way. It means the gentle way, the gentle but effective way of communicating. Doc was an English professor, a martial artist, and a law enforcement officer, and he took those three things and created a revolutionary way to talk to people and to diffuse conflict. And that's where it was born out of. Today, 37 years later, we're still all over the country and all over the world. We're an international company training people on that simple ideal that if you can communicate people, and I'll talk a little bit later about what I mean by tactical, because I think, especially when you have parents listening, you're going to hear that word tactical and think, I'm never going to be in any kind of tactical situation with my kids. That's not what we mean. It's a method of communicating that's strategic, that there is a purpose and a plan and strategies implemented that are going to be effective. So that's where the company started, and today we've trained millions of people in a variety of different disciplines in the art of tactical communication.
Excellent. And I love that, the metaphor of judo and martial arts. And I think it really is, as a lifelong martial artist myself, one of the things that I see the advantage of that training is if you're attacked, if you're in a tactical situation, there's a lot of panic, there's a lot of fear, much like if your teenager comes home and screams, I hate you. There's this emotional response, there's this confusion, but if you have the training to identify what's happening and have a plan going in, your chances of success are much greater. And that seems to me where verbal judo comes in.
Yeah, you have quite a library behind you, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of the books that sits back there is Sun Tzu's Art of War. And I always reference this book, a 5th century BC Chinese military strategy book, when I teach verbal judo. And sometimes people say, how do those two things correlate? A book written thousands of years ago to today. And you're going to see the parallels between actual physical fighting, that idea of physical warfare, and communications warfare. They link up. So, the idea of the physical martial art versus the art of communication, you're going to see those two things mirror each other in so many different ways. And Sun Tzu said the whole idea behind Art of War, the true object of war is peace. And that's what we're working towards. And that's how, this art can benefit our families that are with us today.
Now, to paraphrase, the general who wins 1,000 battles, he's pretty good. But the master general is the one who emerges victorious without a fight at all.
Absolutely. That's the real champion in warfare. Absolutely.
And it seems like verbal judo is delivering us a set of tools to do exactly that in communicating with anybody. And for our listeners, with our kids, which as the kids get older, especially, is harder and harder. So could you introduce a little bit about what are some of those tactics? How do we approach a verbal and emotional tussle with our kids, the verbal judo way?
Well, I think before we talk about strategies, before we talk about the meat and potatoes, and we're going to talk about the idea of eliminating our old ideal of sticks and stones. The sticks and stones, we're not going to worry about words. We're actually going to address verbal attacks. We're going to deflect and redirect them, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I like to focus on before we talk about those strategies is things that I want to encourage people to eliminate. Phrases that are all too often used. And I've been a verbal judo instructor for a few years now, and I still catch myself using these phrases all the time. I think if we can eliminate some things that I feel like are useless in communication, then we'll be ready to get into those strategies. So when I talk about that in Verbal Judo, the text, George Thompson talks about things never to say, 7 things never to say to people, and why they're not effective. Those phrases being things like "come here," and I talked about the mirroring between Sun Tzu and today's world. Sun Tzu said, "The spot where we intend to fight must not be made known, for then the enemy will have to prepare against a possible attack at several different points." And we talk about that with "come here." The typical cop shows, which really portray the law enforcement world in a kind of an unfair light. That "come here" is natural language. It's what rises readily to the lips. It's easy. But if we're communicating tactically, we're not giving advanced warning to the person, or especially with our tone and pitch and moderation of our voice, it gives your subject the opportunity to either go away quickly, or make preparations for what's coming their way. That samurai technique was to never let an opponent pick the place of battle, so you could position yourself. So that "come here" is loose, it's lazy, it's ineffective. Something better might be, "Hey, may I chat with you?" Or "Can I borrow you for a second? Can you provide me with a couple minutes to talk?" Especially as parents, we don't want to come off, even if something has gone wrong, we don't want to come off as there being an issue. Let's sit down, let's get into it, and let's give the other party the opportunity. When we talk about more things, probably the one that everyone says on a regular basis is "calm down." And we want to eliminate that, because everyone knows, the phrase "calm down" usually elicits the opposite reaction. We usually get people who, when you say "calm down," well, either it's "I am calm" or "I have every right to not be." Mm-hmm. It's that natural, and that is probably the one that rises most naturally to the lips of a person who is dealing with someone who's agitated, especially a child who may have problems controlling their emotions. There can be situations where emotions take over, and that's children and adults. And it's very easy, and we're going to avoid that easy language. It's very easy to say things like "calm down." Never in the history of "calm down" has anyone been calmed down by getting told to calm down.
Yeah.
So, things like that are ineffective language. We want to say something like, "Hey, listen, I'm here to help you. I want to sit down and have a conversation. What can we do to make this better?" One of the things that we really stress in Verbal Judo, and I think for parents can be incredibly effective when they're dealing with conflict in their household, is we're getting away from the you versus me perspective of conflict. It's got to be a we perspective. We are working together to come to a resolution in something, because at the end of the day, those are still your children. You are still their parents. You're not breaking ties because of this conflict. So we need language that facilitates us to a we resolution, because you're going to work together, and that's going to get you to that goal that much quicker. As parents, you're looking for voluntary compliance. You're looking for the other party, your children, your spouse, whatever it may be, to do what you are asking them to do, because they feel that you have their best interest in mind, or that what you're asking them to do is going to be best in the long run. So, when we're posing how we're involved, it's a two-sided street. We're working from both sides. You have a role as the parent, and the child has the role as well. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Kind of that dichotomy between leaning on authority as a parent rather than using your influence.
Yeah, yeah, and you have, you have so much authority, you have so much power as a parent, whether you have a good relationship or not, just simply by your job title as a parent, uh, you're taking on such a big role in that person's life and that person's safety, that you have to be able to realize that you have just as big of a role. You have just as big of a part to play in that aspect than, as the child. So getting back to the things never to say, we talked about come here, we talked about calm down. Another big one, a famous parent phrase, is I'm not going to tell you again, or I'm only going to say this one more time. It is, again, it is a very easy thing to say, and it's born out of frustration. It's something that you are put in a situation where you're kind of at your last whim, and you have repeated yourself. And we'll talk a little bit later about why excessive repetition can be really dangerous. But we talk in verbal judo that repetition or that preparation is weak. So when you say, I'm not going to tell you again, things can go one of two ways. Well, either you're going to say it again, which most parents are probably in that boat. They're more likely to have to repeat themselves. So what happens there? What's the problem when I said, I'm not going to say this again, or I'm only going to say it one more time, and you keep repeating yourself? Well, you've lost your credibility. And, kids are smart, man. They pick up on those kind of things. Mom, dad, they told me, I'm not going to tell you to clean your room or brush your teeth or do your homework. They said, I'm not going to tell you again. They told me again. Mm-hmm. So I'm losing my credibility as a parent. And that's one of the things we're really trying to avoid. And then on the other side, the other unintended consequence of a phrase like that is, just like before I talked about, we're not warning people. If you have to say, I'm not going to tell you again, you got to be ready to act at that point. You're giving away your position. Well, I have come to the end of the road. The next step is that escalation. So we're not, if we're good tactical communicators, we're not going to give that warning,
Yeah, ultimatums are almost always a bad idea, especially in family communication.
Yeah. We want to be able to stress when something is important. So something better is going about it with something like, listen, it's important that you get this point. So pay close attention to what I'm about to say, because it's something I really want to make sure we're on the same page about. We preach this idea in business a lot when there's some sort of deadline or some sort of project that's going on, where you have a very important aspect of communication that needs to be reiterated. Hey, listen, I really need you to get this, and I really need you to understand what I'm saying. So please pay close attention. In business, you're telling them, hey, can you write this down, or do you need it in an email? With your kids, you might not have that luxury. So, pay close attention, because this is something that's very important. You still want to emphasize how this matters, but not to the point where we're giving that warning or losing our credibility. Then we talk about avoiding phrases like "be more reasonable" or "what's your problem." Those have some of the same issues as calm down. They're saying you're the problem, and you need to come down to my level. Just in what's your problem. You want to say, you can change one word and be successful there. Hey, what's the problem? What's the issue here, and what can we do to make this right? Or with be more reasonable. Using strategies like paraphrasing, which is something we'll talk about in a few minutes, is incredibly useful there. Hey, I can tell that you're upset. Let me make sure that I understand what's going on. You're feeling X because of Y, and go from there. And you are giving everybody the opportunity to get on the same page. That's what's about so much of the time, is getting on that same page.
Outstanding.
So when finishing up with our things not to say, another famous parent phrase, and probably one that a lot of times we as parents have the right to say, is because those are the rules or because that's the law, in answer to the question why. And why is such an important question in tactical communication. It's the magic point where things can deteriorate if they're not addressed adequately. In verbal judo, we talk about the race to the why, racing to the answer to why. In law enforcement, when we teach how to do a car stop, we want to win the race to the why, because so often when you're stopped by a police officer, your first thought is why. And if that question can get answered quickly and professionally and adequately with respect, then it's going to make the entire communication more successful, more cohesive. So it's the same idea with your children. You want to win that race to the why, to give them the respect that you're asking from them. Because those are the rules, or because that's the law, because it's my house, is no good anymore. That's not enough. We're going to, if you have a good reason to implement a rule or to ask your children to do something, give them that respect of telling them why that this is something. And remember, if you're going to generate voluntary compliance, if you're doing this in a way that's tactical, you want to answer that why question with what's in it for them, what their best interest lies in doing what you're asking them to do. So often with kids, it's actually a reward. You know, I need you to do this because you want to go to your friend's house, or you want to have extra time on the Xbox, or you want, you know, what do you want? What are your goals in this, interaction, and how can I get you there? So you're posing that why with their best interest in mind.
Excellent. So those are the rookie mistakes to avoid, which all of us do naturally in our conversation.
Yeah.
This is a considered way, mistakes to avoid, so you can go into the conversation with the best words in your mouth and the best goals in your mind.
Absolutely. You know, it's something where we talk about the difference between natural language and the studied response. The taking the extra second. It's called natural language for a reason. It rises readily to the lips, and it often puts you in a situation where you're giving the greatest speech you'll ever live to regret. You know, it's something where it's easy. Easy language is the way that we communicate without some sort of training, because it's what we've always known. You know, when someone is upset, you respond with, hey, calm down. Or when it's not your problem, when it's not something that you can, handle, your kid is upset because their friend at school is teasing them or wouldn't give them a turn, on the jungle gym. It's very easy to say something like, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah.
It's lazy. If you're not the person, let's figure out the direction that you can point your other side of the communication in to get to a successful result, so that we don't keep having, repeat customers. In law enforcement, a lot of times we talk about that one in terms of customer service. You get on the phone with, Verizon, not knocking Verizon, but you get on the phone with Verizon and you're upset about, your bill or something like that. And you get back from the customer service representative, what do you want me to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Now you've created two problems. The one that you started with, and then the additional one by evading responsibility. We're not evading responsibility. So, I think an important thing for parents' egos is don't be afraid to apologize. Apologizing is not weakness. Hey, listen, sorry, this isn't something that I necessarily know enough about, but let's figure it out. Let's work together to get to that point where we're in a better place and this doesn't keep on happening.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of a lot is break falls from judo, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The natural response if you fall down is to stick your arm out like this, which is how you get a compound fracture of your ulna. But when you're trained, you learn to do one of several different break falls where you come out of the fall uninjured. But the first thing you have to do is get over that reflex to stick your, sorry about that, someone tried to call me. But you have to get over that influence to do this, or that reflex to do this. And it's just like that. All those words that were listed, those are our reflexive ones. That adult refusal to apologize to a child is a reflex. And we're getting over those reflexes through superior training is what it sounds like you're telling us to do.
Yeah. And this all comes from realizing those things. You said it perfectly there. The man that invented the art or the sport of judo, he was a kung fu and karate instructor. And his students kept getting hurt in practice and in competition. And he said, there's got to be a different way to fight. Instead of attacking and instead of receiving blows through those physical attacks, he said, I'm going to focus on deflection and redirection and repurposing someone else's energy and using it to my advantage. So it comes out of a problem. Solving a problem is how the solution is born. And if we can solve that problem in communication of, hey, I'm receiving these blows and they're not being resolved, and there's a better way to do it. That's the way we want to go about it.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
So we talked about the things never to say, the things we want to avoid in communication. And I always start with that because we make those mistakes so commonly. And before we talk about what to say and how to say it, I think that if you can recognize things that mistakes that you've been making, and I promise someone might hear this podcast and say to themselves, I'm never going to tell anyone to calm down again. Next time someone is yelling and screaming or agitated, their kid, whoever it may be, your first instinct is going to be calm down. Like, you have to think bigger picture, and you have to think tactically. Mm-hmm. So that's those are the baseline ones. The book actually covers 11 things never to say, but I always talk about those 7 as being really the paramount ones. So I talked briefly in there about the idea of paraphrasing and to improve communication, to get on the same page as someone. So if you are one of those people that oftentimes finds that they're in a conversation with their children or their family, and it just does not seem like you're connecting, like that you are understanding each other, understanding problems or what the other person is saying. Paraphrasing can be a really effective tool that parents can use to make sure that everybody gets the message. And when I say paraphrasing, I said it quickly before, but that's the idea of saying something like, hey, I can really see that this is upsetting you. I just want to make sure that I get it for your sake. You're feeling X because of Y. You're feeling upset because I wasn't able to be at your soccer game, or you're feeling angry because your brother gets more allowance than you. Whatever it may be. You want to make sure that you have that confirmatory statement, that ability that your child can say to you, yeah, and it's creating empathy between the parent and the child. Empathy broken down, the EM means to see, and pathy means through the eyes of another. So it's so important that your child or whoever you're communicating with realizes that you're trying to see it from their perspective and that you do understand. So just doing that paraphrasing really connects the two parties and gives everyone the ability to be on that same page, because they can either say, yep, that's what's going on, or they have the ability to modify and say, you know, that's not really what I'm upset about. This is what's going on.
Excellent. I can see that really working, especially with your elementary school students and then teens, where the elementary school students are learning to communicate about their feelings and might even need some help from their parents' vocabulary to really nail down what's going on, and then
to understand the emotion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And with paraphrasing, there's a number of useful things, and why we in the verbal judo world refer to it as one of the most powerful communication tools. Well, I talked about empathy and how important that is, but you also have to realize that there's a tactical side of this, because no one is going to listen harder than to their own point of view. You know, no one's going to listen harder than someone saying, this is what you're saying, or this is how you're feeling, right? So it gives you that opportunity to confirm or modify, which is very important, because maybe we're not on the same page, and you know, your child needs to better express themselves, or you, like you said, for the younger kids, they need to be able to understand those emotions, and maybe you're the one to help them. And you also have a pretty great tool that we in verbal judo call the sword of insertion. And what that means, it's a respectful way to interrupt and to gain control back of a conversation. Now I'm feeling like I'm talking a lot at you, so you use this anytime you want to jump into this conversation. And how that works is, you have someone, you've lost flow of a conversation, you've lost control. What we use as the sort of insertion is we use this paraphrasing. So we do something like, whoa, hold on one second. Let me make sure that I understand what you're saying. Let me make sure that we're on the same page. You're feeling X because of Y. Hey, listen, let me just ask you something real quick. I want to make sure that we're hearing this the same. So in the professional world, it's a polite, respectful way to interrupt someone. You know, for your kids, you have someone that you may have lost track because there's so many different roads that something is going down. You have that ability to say, whoa, take control back. Now I've foot swept the conversation. It's back in my control. It's tactical, but I'm doing it in a respectful way. And then the mouth closes and the ears open, because at that point, they're listening to their own perspective to confirm that we're on the same page.
Static. That's such a better alternative to the talking over or raising your voice that a lot of parents, I know I've made that mistake. And again, that's one of those things that doesn't really work too well. But that's a great way of interrupting. I feel like a lot of parents also, we have that trouble where a younger kid is just kind of random access rambling at a certain point, and they're getting way out there, or the teenager introduces the mutant topic. And then, like you say, the conversation's off and running in a less useful direction or off the main topic. And then you are wondering how to interrupt without just, again, inserting your authority in the situation. Or this gives you a good tool to, as you say, sweep the leg of the conversation and smile, using the gentle way.
Yeah, and that's it. It is such a profound yet gentle way to take control back. And you mentioned it, the mistake of raising our voice in conflict is something that I talk about frequently when I go to verbal judo classes. I say, next time that you're in that situation and the volume is continually going up, try something different. Try actually going lower. Because what you're doing is you are raising your voice in order to match the person that you are going, having this conflict with. Try going the other direction and try minimizing your voice, lowering your voice, because people play that game, they match. So if a person is agitated and they are way up in terms of volume and in terms of that conflict level, if we can go down and have them come down to us, have that realization that they are clearly the aggressive party in the confrontation come down to us. It's kind of like it's a little bit of a tactical trick, but you know, your natural instinct, your natural language is to go up. Try going down next time.
Interesting. And again, we're back to that overcoming instincts that were useful in some situations, survival instincts, through superior training and using our intelligence in the front of our brain instead of our lizard brain when the conversation is important.
Yeah, and you know, people are going to sit here and and take this information, and it's very easy in a low stress environment. It's very easy to hear this and say, sure, that makes sense. Let me implement these. It is so much harder to take these things and practically apply them. You know, when we go out and do verbal judo training, a huge aspect of our training is scenario based and using these strategies when the pressure is on. And you know, for a lot of people, there's no greater pressure than family drama. You know, these are the people that you love the most, the people that you're closest to, and the people that your communication with them is most crucial to your overall happiness. Mm-hmm. So, you know, once you take this information, you say, okay, this is a new way of going about it. Like I said, the next time you're in that scenario, it's a whole different story to put it to the test. But we've shown over the years that these are really, really effective strategies that if you can implement them, you're going to have more success. It's a challenge though. And especially with your kids, because you know there's so much emotion riding.
And I think it's important to also acknowledge that the kids have so much emotion because, you know, they're younger, they haven't regulated the emotions yet. A good friend of mine uses the phrase, big emotions in a little body. And then our own emotions, right? Where we're thinking of every conversation we have with a child that's going poorly, there's a part of our brain that's yammering at us about, you suck as a parent. You are failing at the most important job you will ever have. And so acknowledging that we're experiencing these emotions too. And as you say, figuring out how to apply these things that sound great in a podcast when we talk it over with our spouse later.
Sure.
But it's another thing entirely to master your emotions and use them in the moment when the challenge is on us.
Yeah. There's two things that I want to touch on with that in mind. Mm-hmm. The first is we have to realize that people rarely say what they mean when they're angry or upset. They are under the influence of fear, of anger, of it could be, you know, actual, you know, stimulus. Mm-hmm. But we talk about these people as being under the influence of these things, so they are not saying what they actually mean. So our goal as tactical communicators is to respond to people's meanings, not react to their words. So our goal is to pull out of those verbal attacks what the true meaning is behind what the person is saying. And that takes some practice, that takes some skill, because, you know, a teenager telling their parents, you know, they hate them because they never let them do anything, or, you know, they're tyrants, whatever it may be, you know, that's not their true meaning. They're angry, they're upset. Their true meaning is probably one specific incident that led them to make that statement. So it's our job as contact professionals to respond to the meaning, not react to their words. There's a Japanese phrase that we talk about in verbal judo called mushin, M-U-S-H-I-N. And that is a mindset of going into conflict disinterested, with no mind, no bias. And especially with our families, it's so very difficult because there's so many emotions and there's so much, you know, bias just built into these communications. But it's not being, and I always differentiate, it's not being uninterested. You are not uninterested in the outcome of this conflict. You have to approach it in a disinterested manner. You know, you don't have you don't let your personal face show. You're responding to the meaning without reacting to the words. We can do that. If we can have that mindset, we're putting ourselves in a much better place for success.
Wow, that's a really interesting dichotomy between those two things, and it hadn't occurred to me. That's really valuable.
You know, it's something where, again, another one of those things that it's much more difficult to put to practical application. But if you can mentally prepare yourself beforehand, and we use the term showtime, that it's time to put on our face. We often split the face right down the middle, and here's our professional face and our personal face. Now, communication with kids is the most personal thing that you can have, but you can't let verbal attacks to you, who you are as a parent, as a person, as a as a spouse, whatever it may be. You cannot let those things influence your response if you want to communicate successfully. So that's the mindset that you have to have, even when it's the most personal of issues. Our goal, and we're about to talk. I'm going to go into responding to verbal attacks in just a second. But our goal is to respond to the meaning, address it, deflection, redirection, and get back on our goal, whatever that goal may be. If we can do that, we're in a much better place communicating.
It's almost as if we're responsible as the adult in the conversation to behave like an adult.
It sounds like a pretty simple thought process, but I think every parent would say that they're guilty at least once of not being the responsible party.
Hands up.
There's a stand-up comedian, and I can't think of who it is right now, but he tells a joke about getting in an argument with his 4-year-old, and she had been just really giving him a hard time all day, just a lot of misbehaving. And he starts off, he's talking, I got in an argument with my 4-year-old. Now, whose fault is that? Is it the 4-year-old's fault or my fault? He gets an argument about something, semantics of a word. She says it's one word and he says it's a different word, and they get into an argument about it. And he says, I'm pretty sure that's my fault there. I can't put the onus, even though she was wrong. The onus of the argument is on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's, recognition is a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So when we talk about verbal abuse, and this is what it all comes down to, tactical communication, we want to be able to respond to verbal abuse and have a studied response, not that natural language, avoiding that natural language. Verbal Judo, we talk about strip phrases, and this idea of utilizing strip phrases to kind of strip the power away from a verbal attack. I told you at the beginning, I want to eliminate that idea of sticks and stones or ignoring verbal attacks, because I think that only addresses half of the issue. People who are able to ignore verbal attacks, that's a great skill, absolutely. But you can go one step further with this strategy. And that's the idea of deflection and redirection. So how it goes is, you're verbally attacked. Your response should respond to the meaning. So you're told that you are the worst parent on earth, that, they wish that they were someone else's kids. Your response isn't just to ignore it and move on. It's, hey, listen, I hear you on that, and I understand why you feel that way. Under identical circumstances, I'd probably feel the same way. But here's what is going to happen. And the way that whole response breaks down is, everything before the but is the strip phrase. It's stripping of the power. And a lot of times, Doc Thompson talks about strip phrases as he uses ones like, I appreciate that, or I understand that. He actually strips the words because he doesn't appreciate that, but he can appreciate that. Or he doesn't understand that, but he can understand that. You know, it's playing with words a little bit. You're stripping that power. Doc actually stripped the words, but everything before the but is responding to the meaning. Hey, listen, I hear you on that, and I can really understand. I can appreciate why you feel that way, or you know, I'm really sorry that you do feel that way. So you're still receiving what is being said. You know, you are about to deflect and redirect it, but you are not ignoring what is being said. So you're the worst parent on earth. You can move on and say, no, I'm not, you're grounded. Or you can say, hey, listen, you know, I really hear you on that. I probably would feel the same way under identical circumstances, but, and then we're back on our goal. So we call it Playground America. It's you know, it's springboard focus technique. So we are springboarding over the verbal attack to get back on our goal professionally, or in this case personally. So everything after the but is back on goal, because we want to get back there as quickly as possible so we don't lose control. You're addressing and responding to the meaning of the attack, but, or and, here's what we're going to do about it. We're responding directly. It's a very direct, and it's also an aspect of respect, because we are not just blowing past. You know, there's a number of reasons why we do that. It makes you feel good because you've been attacked. You hear it, you're moving on. You know, with police officers, you know, you hear examples of this, telling them that they're fat pigs and all they do is donuts. Listen, man, I totally hear you on that. You know, I can see why that is something that frustrates you. But right now we got to get this ticket done, or we got to get this arrest done. You know, it's disempowering the other person while still sounding respectful. You know, verbal judo, we say, you got to look good and sound good, or it's no good. So, you know, we still want to, especially with the world that we live in, we still want to come across as having our wits about us, especially in the law enforcement world now. But it's just as important for parents. Remember, you know, you're the authority there. You still gotta, you know, keep face. And if we're doing this tactically, we want to win. You know, it is still about winning and getting what you are looking for at the end of the day, that goal.
And getting back to that goal of voluntary compliance, as you said earlier, where we can't just stick the thumb down or respond and flare up to that, don't you talk to me that way, young man. But as you say, hey, I get it. I understand you're angry. I'd be angry too. But let's figure out how to get out of this conversation into the conversation that we want to be having about your video games, or about how you're going to get to go to prom even though you got caught shoplifting last week, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, when I talk about voluntary compliance, compliance is the lowest level of success to us. What's better is voluntary cooperation. Mm-hmm. I like to say even one better, voluntary collaboration. It's not just compliance, because compliance, sometimes you might comply, but it might not be exactly the way you want. You know, when we're talking about that we ideal, it is working together. Mm-hmm. So if we can get voluntary collaboration, how about you and me figure out a solution? Let's start working towards that goal.
Outstanding.
That's success in communication.
Absolutely.
So that's the springboard focus technique. That's deflection and redirection, responding to a verbal attack, avoiding that natural language. Now, what happens when you have someone who is not compliant, is not going to cooperate, not going to collaborate with you? We've built a strategy for making a request of someone, of your kids, of your spouse, of a family member, in the most effective way. We call it the 5-step hard style. It's for dealing with someone who's being difficult, someone who is not working with you on something. So the way that that works, the 5-step, is you make your request, you make your ask, and you're getting no compliance. You're getting a 0% compliance. The next step in that process is to set context. And all that is answering that question of why. And that is the race to the why. We always want to win the race to the why. So you've made your ask. Your next step is to set context. You are telling the person why you are making that request. And remember, if we're doing it tactically, you are making that request with the other person's best interest in mind in the way that you form the question. So what that means is, I need you to do this. The reason that I need you to do this is because as soon as this gets done, we can move on to the next thing. You can go outside. You can go to your friend's house. You can play your game. It has to be formed with their thought process in mind, not yours. Not, I need you to clean your room because I have friends coming over and I don't want my house to look a mess. You're not communicating effectively if that's your thought process. It has to be what's in it for them. Because as human beings, us, along with our kids, we're going to be greedy in that sense. What's in it for us? Why? Why do I have to do this? And we're going to talk about universal truths in just a few minutes of things, ways that everybody feels. So we've set that context. We've told them why.
I think it's important to remember with that context that with children, your background's in psychology, so I'm sure you took some developmental psychology classes, that although it's good to have your kid clean their room because of the long-term benefits of being the kind of person who cleans your room, a 5-year-old's brain is literally not capable of understanding that yet.
Absolutely.
And so as parents, we should absolutely give ourselves permission to resort to bribery when we're talking about the why.
Absolutely. If that's what's effective, you have to use what's effective. And we often encourage people to be very specific with your why. You have to keep in mind where they are at emotionally or developmentally in the way that you pose that why. So you've set context and you're still not getting collaboration. The next step is to present options. And the way that sounds is, I need you to do this. This is why I need you to do this. So there are 2 options in this scenario, and I really hope that you can work with me and we can get this done in option A. When you present options, the first option is always the good one. So you can clean up your room, you can, whatever it is, you can brush your teeth, you can do your homework. At that point, you'll be allowed to do whatever you are looking for. You'll be set free. I'm going to leave you alone. You can go watch TV. You can go out with your friends, whatever it may be. I really hope that you can choose that. There is another way that this can go, though, and that's option B. If you do not do this at this point, what we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to restrict you from going out. We're not going to be able to do any more, Xbox. We're not going to, be able to let you to go outside because of how important this thing is. We can get it done. I really hope that you can work with me and we can get this done in option A, because I certainly wouldn't want to see it go option B. So we've presented options. We've been really specific. We've given them a good way and a bad way. It's kind of that old gangster idea. There's 2 ways we can do this. The easy way or the hard way. We give them the easy way, we give them the hard way. Then we go back to something that I talked about a little bit earlier with excessive repetition. Remember, to be tactical, we are not going to repeat ourselves excessively. We're not going to say the same thing over and over again, because the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So instead of that threat, that empty threat of I'm only going to say this one more time, or I'm not going to say this again. We're going to go about it a different way. We're going to use a confirmation phrase. And that confirmation phrase is there anything that I can say or do at this time to gain your voluntary compliance, gain your, you're helping me out on this. I'd really like to think so. I'd like to think that we can get this done. It's a confirmation phrase. And what that does is that gets you ready to act. We're not warning that the next step is discipline or some sort of consequence for the person. Is there anything that I can say or do? Because if the answer is no, we got to be ready to act at that point. We have to be ready to make our decision as parents and be able to say, okay, well, here is what is going to happen. It gives you that strength and authority while still giving respect. Because you know what I just did? I gave my boy or girl the chance. I gave him the chance. Is there anything that I can say or do? No? Okay, well, we're going to move on. It's pretty amazing, the statistical look at this. From making that initial ask with 0 out of 10 compliance, 0% compliance, when we get to that confirmation phrase, we're already at about 90% compliance at that point. Once we get to that point, studies have shown using this method goes from no compliance to just about everybody complying with you.
Well, I can see that working, especially with a child and who's feeling that they're not listened to, they feel like they have no power, to have their parents say, what can I do? What can I say to get you on board? I think that would be immensely appreciated. There's another stand-up comic, and I can't remember his name either, who used to say that dealing with a child is like dealing with a very small, very drunk adult. And in law enforcement, of course, substances are a huge part of your problems. And I can see that anything that would work on a drunk adult would probably also work on a 60-year-old.
A lot of similarities. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to think of it that way, that, the tried and true and what you believe might be effective for you is not necessarily what's going to be effective for someone else. That we can't guarantee that.
You said earlier that you'd use the phrase about how you go into the conversation assuming they're under the influence of their emotions, or just being under the influence of being 7 or 13.
Yeah,
which is
and just not being developed. Yeah, or hormones going on. There's a lot of influencing factors besides drugs and alcohol. There are a ton, and being a kid is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the drugs, the ones that are illegal and the ones that are legal, what they do is mimic what adolescence does to your brain naturally all the time already. Yep. It's rough. Now, you had mentioned 5 universal truths, which I think are a great way to end the interview. But first, Alex, wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what's going on. What are you working on now that you're excited about, the hopes and folks that you'd like to share with the crowd?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned at the beginning, we've been around for 37 years, and the world has changed so immensely. When you read Doc's book and the things that he's talking about going on in the world at that time and what we are seeing today, there's no greater time for learning how to communicate effectively. For whoever you are, whatever profession you're in, there's so much conflict in the world. And I really believe that so much can be addressed by learning to communicate. So we're doing what we've always done. We're out there training. I think a lot of people have the common misconception that verbal judo is only for law enforcement or military. I would say probably the majority of the people that we teach are outside of those fields. We've trained over 1 million police officers, but we are seeing a huge influx of customers from other disciplines, whether it's the business side or healthcare. We have a lot of clients in healthcare. I said at the beginning, we're boardroom to bedroom. We are not designed to only be for the professional or only be at home. That these strategies are meant to translate either way, and if we can do that, that's our success. So we're out there training. We like everyone else in the world, we have adjusted during quarantine and during this time of extreme safety and social distancing. We are hosting some classes online, both instructor courses, instructor recertifications for those people who their time is up. Our instructor certification is a 3-year certification. So those people who are re-ups, we're going to do our instructor courses for the first time ever via webinar. We've hosted a number of webinars throughout the world for tactical communication. I just hosted a Verbal Judo for people when dealing with people with mental illness, because it's a little bit different of a perspective there. And we're getting ready to get back out there and train, going on the CDC guidelines. We're a training company. That is what we're here for, but we are certainly evolving into some other aspects of the world. And anything that anyone is interested in pursuing further, they can find it on verbaljudo.com and our social media sites. We're on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram under the Verbal Judo Institute. So anyone who is interested in looking into these things more, that's where you can find it. But at the end of the day, we're a training company that our purpose is to give this information to as many people as possible, to make people safer. That's the overarching goal.
That's the overarching goal here too. And I like what you said earlier about how it's a professional training course or a professional way of going about things. And yes, our parenting is very personal, but at the same time, that's our job. Being a parent, raising a kid, the most important job, and the most demanding, the most frustrating. And if we can take that, treat it as professionally as we do conflicts in the workplace, and we all have that one coworker who is at least as unreasonable as our 7-year-old, right? And we have to keep it together and be professional there. If we can take a little piece of that, a little piece of this training home, I think the outcome will be better. And I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your insights today.
If you're not using it both places, I haven't done my job here. This is meant to be just as useful on that personal side as professionally. There's nothing about any of these things that can't translate both ways. And what I'll say is it takes practice to put this in your mind and communicate in this manner. But if you can implement just a few of these strategies, you're going to see your communication drastically improve.
Yeah, I can certainly imagine so. And you had mentioned them, the 5 universal truths behind everything. I think that's a great, I'd love to hear them, and I think it's a great place to kind of finish up.
Okay, and I'm going to tie them right into what we just talked about with making a request of a difficult person, because those two things really mesh together. When we talk about universal truths, things that everybody, regardless of your race, ethnicity, your background, your profession, these are things that Doc Thompson, came up with, these truths. And what they are the number one, that all people want to be treated with dignity and respect. And I talked about respect a number of times through this process. Number 2, that all people want to be asked to do something rather than told to do something. So remember how we posed our questions, our request of someone, at being asked rather than being told, and doing so with respect. Number 3, that all people want to be told why they're being asked to do something. That everybody wants that answer. And remember, we want to win the race to the why. We want to set that context, because that's a true sign of respect, even to your children. Number 4, that all people want to be given options rather than threats. That threatening, we talked about the resorting to bribery. Nothing wrong with that, but we don't want to be threatening in our presenting of options. That number 2, that negative option should not be posed as a threat. It should be posed as just one of 2 options, and I really hope you can choose the positive option. And then number 5, that all people want a second chance. All people, regardless, there's no perfect person out there. We can all look back on an opportunity and say, wish I had a second chance to do that, a different way. And that's where the confirmation phrase of, is there anything that I can say or do to get you on the same page? That's where that can really come in. That might be the point where your kid says, okay, you know, maybe I have an out here. I have a way to fix this. And, you know, that's the universal mindset of people, not of, you know, people in conflict or criminals or kids or whoever it may be. That's universal. Those are universal truths that Doc, you know, found were, if we can address those 5 things, if we can keep those things in mind as we, you know, go about our daily lives and interact with our professional life or our family and our children, we're really going to put ourselves in a much safer place.
Yeah. And going over the list, I feel like a lot of them they're not only necessary and an integral part of what children need, but in some ways unusual. I think how often the school system treats children with dignity and respect, and how easy it is in our own way to think, well, you're just a kid, your opinion doesn't matter, I know better than you. Or how often is a kid asked to do something instead of told to do something in the natural communication. And on. It seems very much that our natural instinct when dealing with children is to refuse them all 5 of these things that all people need to feel valued and to accept this gentler means of persuasion and communication. So I think it's hugely valuable that you brought that to our attention today.
For sure. Yeah, and I hope that people, you know, I never like to say that teacher phrase of, if you take one thing away, because I hope that you took more away in a situation like this. But if you can take something away, treating people in that manner and having that perspective, it's just going to make you a better overall human being. And that's, you know, we wake up every day and try and be better than the day before. So that's our goal here.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time today, Alex. I know it's a weird time and you're a busy man, and I just really appreciate you coming in to share your information with us all.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I am really happy to be a part of this. You said it before, parents have the most important job. I can train, you know, every different kind of professional, but your audience here is doing a job that is incredibly important, and you're shaping the next generation of the people that are going to be responsible for us. So we teach them how to communicate well, and they'll take good care of us when we're, you know, old and gray.
That's the hope. That's the hope. Well, thank you again, and thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for watching our show today. I hope you found something useful. If you have any questions about what you saw, please do leave them in the comments below. Myself, our guest, or our community will do our best to get those answers for you. If we don't know them ourselves, we will go find someone who knows them. If you loved us, please do hit the like button and the subscribe button. They make a bigger difference than you're thinking right now. And of course, go ahead and click on some of those videos YouTube is suggesting to you right now. We have a lot of stuff that we've worked hard on and are proud of, and hope that you'll enjoy them too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.